Well, earlier today, Donald Trump met privately with members of his newly established foreign policy team. This before attending that Republican National Committee meeting. Senator Jeff Sessions, of course, is the one who's helping. He's the architect of this, if you will. You all know Dr. Waleed Ferris, Carter Page, General Keith Kellogg Jr., George Papadopoulos, and Joseph Schmitz. Trump, however, said that in the past that he largely relies on himself when it comes to matters of national security and international relations, but this is becoming a hot and heavy issue, so we brought in the best. Christian Whiton joins Mark Serrano and Morgan Ortagus. Christian, yesterday, or I'm losing track of the days, but this week I know Donald Trump had some misgivings about the Geneva Convention, ruffled a lot of feathers, whether about letting South Korea and Japan have nuclear weapons, and of course last week with the NATO comments. Now, I got to tell you, the Geneva Convention, when I was younger, I thought it was kind of weird, like someone can parachute out of a plane with a weapon. I had to wait for them to land before I can shoot them. So why is that a good policy? Why do we need the Geneva Convention or any of that stuff anymore?
Well, it's part of just trying to have some sort of civilization and prevent the type of total war and brutality that we saw in particular beginning with World War II, although earlier than that. So it's basically, if you want a civilization, you want a Geneva Convention. You know, and to add to the list you gave of what Donald Trump has done just yesterday, he sort of mused that maybe he would use nuclear weapons in Europe, but maybe he wouldn't use nuclear weapons in Europe. So, yeah, a lot of crazy talk coming out of him.
Yeah, Morgan, you know, how crazy is it that maybe Japan and South Korea should start to consider paying for their own protection and arming themselves or having nuclear weapons, particularly as China's ambitions become even more imperialistic?
I don't think a nuclear-armed world, to have more nukes in the world, makes us any more safe. I think that, you know, listen, to be fair to Trump, there are, and I've been quite critical of him on foreign policy, there are plenty of governors that run for president that don't have foreign policy experience, but they spend quite a bit of time studying and thinking through their positions. I wish Mr. Trump had done that a year ago. I hope that he sees the importance of doing it now. There is one thing, since I'm tough on him a lot, I will give him credit for. In the New York Times interview, where he talked about foreign policy, he was quite critical of Edward Snowden and everything that he leaked, and seemed to be where me and other foreign policy hawks are as it relates to counterintelligence and what we do or don't do in that field. So I'll give him credit for that, because quite frankly, Ted Cruz said things about Edward Snowden initially that I did not agree with. So I think it's okay to run for president and not have a long background in foreign policy, but you have to be so much more thoughtful on these issues than, for example, our current president is. Why is that, Charles? Because our current president is not taking our relationships with our allies in Europe and the Arab world with Israel as seriously as he should be. So the next president needs to come in, and the very first thing the next president needs to do is to fortify the relationships with the allies and the global balance of power that we've had since World War II.
We need our friends to have confidence in us, but by the same token, though, Mark, Donald Trump is saying things like NATO obsolete, hey, Japan, South Korea, Germany, you guys pick up the tab on your own stuff. So maybe it's a smart thing to do economically. Some people are starting to question some of the folks on the foreign policy team. Are you familiar with them all, Mark?
I'm acquainted with a couple of them. You know, candidly, Charles, I think there's a lot of attention on that. But to me, what's more important is who is the leader of national security policy for the Trump campaign, and it's Senator Jeff Sessions, who's remarkably respected from conservatives across the country and across Washington, and I think is going to add a lot of value and a lot of policy gusto to Trump's candidacy. Look, Trump is selling a leadership style, and it's unrestrained by these conventional metrics. He speaks, and he speaks from the heart, and he speaks from the mind immediately. And he, you know, frankly, what I like, the other thing I like quite a bit about what he has to say is his decisions, Charles, are going to be driven in the marketplace in foreign policy by economics.
Okay, real quick,
he's focused
Mark,
largely on economics.
Mark, before we wrap this up, though, saying, hey, we may or may not use nukes in Europe. He won't take it off the table, but he says it with a wink and a nod. So, you know.
What's he trying to accomplish, Charles? He's trying to win the Republican nomination, and he's trying to draw new voters into the primary process.